Good morning and welcome everyone to this year's Dutch-Belgian Information Retrieval Workshop. My name is Lien and I will be taking care of you here on YouTube today together with my colleagues Jan and Olivier, whereas my colleagues Joey and Robin will be taking care of you on Gather. Finally, on our team is also Bart Goethals, professor at the University of Antwerp, who will be chairing the next session that is coming up right after this welcome presentation. Now, before we get started with that first session of the day, let's allow a little bit of time to let that first coffee really set in while I take you on a tour of DIR's past, this DIR's present, and a hint at DIR's future. So what is DIR? DIR has been around since the year 2000, and then there have been 19 editions over the past 21 years. Only 3 of which in the past took place in Belgium. So we were really excited to be the first year to organize DIR in Antwerp, the beautiful city of Antwerp, and we were so excited. And then a little virus came, and now we pride ourselves on being the first ever online edition, which is also not that bad, I guess. This is also the second Lightning Talk edition. Now, what that means is that you'll be hearing from 10 speakers today across 3 topical sessions who will have 10 minutes each, which is a very short time, to present to you their work that was published in the year 2020 at top-ranked conferences in the field. Now, what do we mean when we say these top-ranked conferences? Well, this year's selection was made from the following list of conferences. As you can see, summer is a really busy time for researchers in information retrieval. Now, why did we want to show you this overview specifically? Well, not so long ago, I guess like a little over a year ago, I was a newbie to the field and I didn't know where to look or where to start. So if you are a newbie in the field like I was last year, take a screenshot of this slide, go and check out the conference proceedings, and hopefully you'll be here presenting your work at DIR2021. Now, about today, let's quickly recap the program. As I said, there will be 3 lightning talk sessions. First one coming up in about 10 minutes, I guess, which will be chaired by Bart Goethals and will be centered around the topic of eCommerce and Bandit Learning. At 11, we already have our second lightning talk session moderated by Suzanne Verberna on the topic of natural language processing. And in the afternoon, we have one last lightning talk session coming up at 2 p.m., which will be chaired by Christine Bauer on the topic of fairness. And that last lightning talk session, is also a great segue into our keynote by Professor Torsten Joachims, professor at Cornell University and one of the most cited authors in the broad field of information retrieval. So we're super excited to have him with us here today. And he will be talking to us about fair ranking with biased data. Now, in between, we'll also have poster sessions. These poster sessions will be held in GatherTown, our online conference venue. We couldn't invite everyone. If we did, this would have become a 3-day event, but there's lots and lots of interesting papers being published in the field of information retrieval in Belgium and the Netherlands. So we try to invite as many of them as we could to our poster session, and we'll have 20 posters and 5 sponsor booths for you in Gather, so do check them out. I promise you it'll be worth it. Then, of course, sometimes you just need to take a break. And so we left ample time for that as well. We'll have a first coffee break at 10:30, then a long lunch break at 12:30, and we'll finish off with our DIY reception at 5 p.m. Now, what does that mean, a DIY reception? Well, it means that we didn't have time to plan any formal social events, but we're really excited to find out what you can come up with. I've heard rumors of karaoke. I'm always down for karaoke. We can also play a game of Pictionary. Find each other in the comments on Twitter, on Gather, make plans, and we'll see you there. Now, until a little less than a year ago, conferences looked something like this, and today they look something more like this. And that's hard. We've all been to a couple virtual conferences this year, and it's not always easy. So we wanted to share with you some tips and tricks for making the most of this DIR2020 online edition. Now, firstly, we'll be using 2 platforms throughout the day. You've already found YouTube, well done. And there's another one that's Gather. So let's start talking about YouTube first for a little bit. Oh, sorry. First thing you're going to want to do is bookmark the session and Gather URLs. If you don't want to bookmark them, at least like favorite the email that you received this morning that contained all of the links, or have the Eventbrite event page open somewhere. There will be 4 different YouTube streams, so 4 different links, one for each of the sessions and one for the keynote, but we only have 1 Gather Town space. So make sure that you have 5 links and then you're good to go for the day. So then YouTube. What do we have to say about YouTube? Well, first things first is this is a live event. And so it would be great if you can also engage and interact with the speakers and the people on screen. For that, we'll be using the YouTube comments. Now, of course, you can only leave a comment if you're watching live. And sometimes there's a little bit of lag on your connection, or you had to go to the restroom or grab a coffee, and you may not be watching live anymore. Then all you have to do is click the button that I highlighted here, that way on my screen. That will skip you right ahead to the current live stream so that you can ask your questions there. Don't worry if you missed anything throughout the day. All of the streams will stay on YouTube for ever and ever, so you can always look back at the things you missed. We'll also be using these YouTube comments for questions. So write down your questions as you think them up while the presenter is still talking. We have our session chairs who will be moderating this comment section, and will make their pick of questions that they want to answer in the live session. Now, we cannot promise that all questions will be answered in the live sessions because 5 minutes is really short for questions. But I'm sure you can find the presenters in Gather afterwards. And if not, just hit us up or send them an email and ask your questions that way. It would also be really great if all of you could now go into the comments and introduce yourself, because, you know, these virtual conferences can be really anonymous, and that's not always fun. But I'm sure there's people here that you already know, or people that you would like to meet. So leave a comment with your first name, where you're from. Let me try this for a second. I am gonna, I'm typing as DIR2020. I'm sorry, guys. So my name is Lien. I am from Belgium, and working on a PhD in collaboration with Frummel and the University of Antwerp. There we go. All right, so I hope to see many other names pop up there, maybe even some names that I know. That would be great. All right. Sorry, seem to be experiencing some technical difficulties. All right, there we go. So next up is Gather. I've been talking about Gather a fair bit already, but what is it if you haven't already experienced it? Well, Gather looks like this. It looks a lot like Pokemon, if you ever played that, one of the early Pokemons. This is our very own Gather space. We have an outside meeting room. Now, before we explain to you how to use our Gather space, there's 2 things that you want to check first. First is you need to check if your microphone and preferably also your webcam are working. Gather is not a text-based platform. You can walk around with your avatar and really talk to people. So test if all of that works. It'd be great if you could also turn on your webcam so that we can see you. All of that makes it a little more engaging. Another thing is that Gather loves Firefox and Chrome, but apparently Safari doesn't really love us. So I'm sorry if you're a Safari user most of the time today, you're going to have to be a Firefox or Chrome user. Now it's demo time, so let's hope that the demo gods accepted my sacrifice today, because I'm going to start playing a video. Let's see if this works.
Welcome to our DIR2020 gather space. Let's take a look inside. The bar is the room for socializing, talking, and after the workshop, maybe even a karaoke session. To the right is the poster room. Here you can talk to authors about their work and find our awesome sponsors. Here are some quick tips for using Gather. Gather lets you select your avatar and customize their look, so feel free to play around with this. If your avatar is stuck or something else is bugging out, you can reset your position, which will put you back outside. Gather connects people based on proximity. As you come close to another person, your audio and video is shared. To efficiently move through a crowd without interacting with others, you can use Ghost Mode by keeping G pressed. This will allow you to pass through other avatars as well. In order to allow lots of conversations to happen, each table in the bar has its own private space. Audio and video is shared to all people inside the private space and no one outside of it, even if they stand next to you. That's it. Hope to see you all online soon.
All right, so glad that worked. Before I move on with my presentation, I just want to thank the people that have already put their names, affiliations, and countries of origin and residence in the comments. I'm so excited to see all of you guys here. Some of you I will definitely meet up with later in our Gather Down space. Now, one more thing is that we're quite active on Twitter. So please join the conversation. And if you do, use a hashtag DIR2020. Let's show the world that the force is strong with the Dutch-Belgian IR community. Maybe we can even get ourselves trending locally, at least. Now, one last thing I want to mention is don't forget to take breaks. We've been to a couple virtual conferences this year, and they can be quite hard on your eyes and sometimes also your energy levels. So take a break from your screen every now and then. I'll show the program again. We've left ample time for you to do so. Go outside, go for a walk, and then when you come back, you'll be ready to pay full attention to all of the talks here today. Now, I also want to thank our sponsors. We have 5 amazing sponsors this year. They are Frumel, DPG Media, TextKernel, Ball.com, and Zeta Alpha. All of these are really great companies working in the information retrieval or recommender system space. Each of them also has a sponsor booth in Gather where they'd love to talk to you about their career opportunities or collab opportunities, or even their product and the things they can do for you. So go and pay them a visit, check them out. I'm sure they will love that. Now, I promised I would hint at DIR's future. So if you liked DIR 2020 or you liked one of the previous editions that you've attended, reach out to us and tell us you want to organize DIR 2021, and then we will get you set up. Now, all that is left for me to do is to tell you to enjoy the workshop. And now I will invite my session chair, Bart Goethals, with me on stage here. There you go. Hello, Bart. Oh, I'm gonna. There.
Hello. Good morning, everyone.
How'd you sleep, Bart?
All right. So I'm good to go. We can start right on time. Wow, that's the first conference where the welcome session ends right on time. So now I should telling everyone, please go to the session, move to the correct rooms. Luckily, this is not necessary here. Welcome everyone to the beautiful city of Antwerp, albeit virtually. As you can see, this session starts in the train station. And we are going to start with the lightning talks. In this first session will be about eCommerce and Bandit Learning. I won't stretch this introduction too long, so we'll just dive right in it. we have 3 lightning talks, one on the role of attributes in product quality comparisons, one on joint policy value learning for recommendation, and one on policy-aware unbiased learning to rank for top K rankings. Our first speaker is Felipe Moraes, who will talk about the role of attributes in product quality comparisons. And this was a paper that they published at the conference on human information and interaction, human information interaction and retrieval. So I hope that Felipe is here. Yes, there he is. So Felipe, the floor is yours, or the screen, or whatever. You're still on mute, Felipe. Yes, I'm the first one to say it. Well, you're still on mute, Felipe. Much better.
So, hi everyone. So this is the paper that I presented at Shear this year. And this was a joint collaboration with Jeunen, Rongting, Zhang, and Vanessa Murdock while I was doing my internship at Amazon Alexa Shopping Research. I'm a PhD student at TU Delft, and I'm glad that you guys are here to hear my presentation. So when you go shopping online, we sometimes
Sorry, Felipe, I'm gonna have to interrupt, but somehow something is wrong with the screen share. We were unable to follow your slides as you progress through them.
Is it fine now?
No.
All right, maybe I can end my slide and do this.
Yes, perfect. Okay.
All right.
That would be great. Thank you.
All right. Sorry, guys, for the technical problem. So when we go shopping online, we often evaluate many products before we go and decide which product we are going to buy. So here, for example, for headphones, we analyze many of these with these products. And there's also a question why we choose the headphone with the green color. So it can be for many attributes. So here, for example, sound quality, or the noise, the headphone has noise cancellation, or it can be brand name, price, and weight. Our goal with this research is to understand how customers select a product that is better from comparable ones. So when we talk about comparable products, we are talking about products that are similar in need. So if someone is trying to find a product and it fulfills the same need as the other one, so those are comparable products. And we also have that they may be different by price, even quality, and the attributes that we talked about before. But how can we find those attributes that people care about for product quality assessment? So we have attributes that come from the catalog. So for example, weight or color, and those can give us which of the comparable attributes and different values. However, many of those attributes are not based on what people care about. So the research questions of this paper are based on which data source is more useful for people making comparable comparison about quality. So are the reviews, are the attributes that come from reviews, are the attributes that come from quality, from the catalog, I mean, and what the attributes that customers care about. So what are those specific attributes? And can we find a proxy as well in the query log of an e-commerce search engine for product quality? So for achieving this, we are gonna build 2 data collections. First, we need to find the products that are comparable ones. So how we did that? We went to the Amazon.com for the shop, all the shop sessions. We collect 1.4 million shop sessions, and we analyze pairs of products that happen on the same shop session. From these pairs of products, we're going to guarantee that those products came from only five shopping departments at Amazon, so to restrict our study. And we collect a query log for about 1 year. So those products be sure that they have title, description, price, brand. They contain the reviews that the customers gave about the product, and also valuable questions and answers. For extracting the comparable products, we rely on a metric that we call purchase preference. So, but we also first we kind of mine those products and filter them based on that they have the same category, subcategory. Here, for example, electronics, headphones, and also something that it called category 3 leaf node, which is basically how all the three of categories that this product has. So, for example, a headphone has electronics headphones, over-ear headphones. We also guarantee that those products pairs that we select, they don't come from the same parent, so they have to come from different parents. Otherwise, we would have products that are trivially comparable. So, for example, only by color here. So here a color black and white, and so for example, and we select sample 1,000 pairs based on a metric that I talk about, purchase preference. So, and you can take a look on the paper for more details about this metric. So for the second collection is about the product attributes. So we select product attributes that come from two different sources, one from the catalog and one from the reviews and questions and answers, which are product attributes that people are self-generate those attributes. So from the catalog, we sample them and we rank them based on how often those attributes happens for a category of that product. So here, for example, for the category over-ear headphone, we have the follow attributes that we rank them, and we select those attributes for our data collection. Next, we have the attributes for the reviews and questions and answers, and here we apply text mining common techniques as, for example, text keyword extractions, and afterwards we rank all those keywords and so on from reviews. And one example of attributes that people say in the on the reviews are, for example, for commuting, headphone is good for commuting, and this attribute doesn't happen in the catalog, but does happen on the reviews. So we select those attributes, rank those, and to answer our research questions, we went to our annotation study. Our annotation study is based on a side-by-side experiment where we gave two products that are comparable ones that we select from the first collection. And we asked the customers, the ground workers, not the customers, but the ground workers, which of the product has better quality after they seen the information about those products. And we gave them the image, the main head image of the product, the title, the description, the customers' questions and answers, and the reviews. And we also ask them what are the attributes that they take them to think that the product is of the better quality. So here you see on the next to the letter I, what are those attributes. There's also other fields that I'm not going to refer to this presentation, but you can take a look at the paper. Now, to briefly go to the results, our first result is about which data source is more useful. And we analyze those data source is more useful in respect to the product attributes by looking to which of the attributes people select in that in the check boxes that I showed you. And we see that the attributes that comes from reviews and questions and answers were more interest than the catalog because they were selected more than the catalog attributes from the ground workers. And the ground workers that usually they click on that button for looking to the reviews and the questions and answers, they select less attributes from the catalog. So this answers us that people actually they care at least for the ground workers that we had in our experiment, which you can see also more details in the paper. How many of them we had? They select more attributes from the reviews and questions and answers, which shows how important this data source is for attributes. Now, what the attributes that customers cares about. So here is an exploratory study where we rank those attributes by popularity, but we account also for labeling bias, so how often those attributes happens on the check boxes. And we see that here from this table, where on the underlying attributes are attributes that come from the reviews and questions and answers, and the underlying attributes that comes from the catalog. Of course, when you rank, you can see more attributes from the catalog coming on the top, but we see attributes that are attributes from the user-generated data or the questions and answers on the top, especially for some, if you go more specific to the category. So here, for example, electronics, and then you go to headphones and audio, you're going to see those attributes happening more often. Now, we asked the question if we could predict or we could find a proxy for product quality if you look to a e-commerce search log. We see that our main metric for purchase preference, where it could correlate to product quality, does not correlate strongly with perceived product quality, which is the perceived product quality from the ground workers. And price is the strongest factor for perceived product quality. And the other attributes are hard to know, but in the paper we also had a random forest model where we tell how can we see the contribution also about those factors. Our conclusions in this paper are that perceived quality is not a good indicator for customers' purchase decisions. However, perceived quality is highly correlated with pricing, and people find attributes from user-generated content or the reviews and questions and answers more useful than the catalog attributes. And after all, understanding the process that underlie customers' purchase decisions will help us make better recommendations. So with that, we want in the future work, we want to predict the product quality that has better quality, and we want to explain why a product has better quality. So those attributes that we talk about here in this paper can be a good set for explanation. And we want to collect a collection from experts. Now we use in this paper ground workers, but we could also look to experts to validate our normal annotation. So, and that's it. If you have any questions, please put on the YouTube comments.
All right, first I'll do the applause for the crowd. There is cheering, you can't hear it, but it's there. So thank you very much, Felipe. I have to check, so people, please feel free to put your questions to Felipe in the comments, and I will then ask them to Felipe. So far, I don't see any questions except for happy birthdays to Lean. In this way, also from us, happy birthday to you, Lean. I'm sure in Gather, everyone will be singing for you in the karaoke area. So, Felipe, about your work was very interesting. I checked the paper also before this, and it was funny to see that in the paper you mentioned that you did this for an anonymous large e-commerce engine. I guess given the authors, it's not that anonymous anymore.
No.
So I'm actually wondering, with these results, how are they being used in practice?
So this is results. Right now, they move towards Amazon explaining the results, and especially the search and the relevance to the users. So this is a movement that Amazon has on explaining the results and so on. So this is more on the understanding of the user satisfaction, this kind of thing.
All right. So we do have a question. I think it's from Barry Kersbergen. User-generated content on e-commerce platforms such as product reviews can be very noisy. Does your approach use reviews as is?
Yes, we actually use the ranking function that is commonly used by Amazon for ranking the reviews and select the top reviews. Amazon also has they filter the reviews based on if there is like some chance of the reviews being faked. So we use the reviews as it is from the data set. That's a yes.
So, and would that be a problem, the fact that this is noisy? I mean, how does this affect your results?
Because, well, it does affect the results, but those are reviews that people often see, right? So if they're the top results, so those are reviews that if you go to Amazon, you're often going to see those reviews, and they're still valuable.
Of course, yeah. All right, I see that we're already out of time, so I'd actually like to close this one here and go to the next talk. Thank you again, Felipe. Well done. And here is already our next speaker, Olivier Jeunen. Olivier will give a presentation on joint policy value learning for recommendation, which was published this year at the KDD conference. Olivier, the screen is yours.
Thank you. All right, so hello everyone. First of all, this is joint work with David, Flavian, and Maarten from Criteo. And as Bart said, this is a paper that was published a few months ago at KDD. So let's dive right in. Many normal, let's say, approaches to recommendation tend to assume the use of data that sort of consists between users and items, and you have these sort of interactions that come from the system, like sort of organically. So you have, for example, views on a retail website where a user views a certain sequence of items, and then the goal of the sort of goal of the system is framed as sort of trying to predict which other items the user has also interacted with. And in this work, we sort of argue that there are some things wrong with this view. So you are sort of trying to frame the task of recommending as some sort of optimal, like sort of autocomplete of user behavior. And this is not the same as performing optimal, and this is not the same as performing optimal interventions. So when you actually show recommendations to users, you're actually changing their behavior, and that is a different task. And so maybe unsurprisingly, the results that we often get in our offline evaluation don't really match what we see online, because what we're doing online is actually showing these recommendations to users. So one way to actually solve this is to look at it from a Bandit perspective. So here you have a certain agent, you have a user. The agent is showing recommendations to the user and then observing the reward, whether the user clicks or doesn't click on these recommendations. And then the goal of the system is to learn which agents, which sort of actions it should actually be performing to obtain a positive reward. So this already is much closer aligned to what you actually have in a real world system. But there are some sort of problems with this view as well. So one of the first thing is that when you have a data set with logs here, so you have different recommendations that you have sort of you have shown to users in the past, and you know whether they like sort of clicked on them. It's not always straightforward to evaluate new systems here. So when you have these new sort of two recommendations that you want to evaluate, which one would be better, that is not always going to be straightforward from your data set. So one way around this would be to actually just deploy these systems and have a live experiment, but that is very, very expensive and also not really an option for most academic researchers. So one way around this is to go for a sort of simulation environment. So in this work, we're using the so RecoGym simulator, which on the one hand simulates this observational data where you have users that are looking at we have users that are sort of browsing different items, and these are these sort of organic interactions that most approaches to recommendation learn from. And then you also have these Bandit interactions, this experimental data, where you have an agent that is actually showing recommendations to the users and then observing whether they click or don't click on them. And the main advantage that you actually get from this is that now you can use these sort of simulated A/B tests as an evaluation tool. So you simulate different cohorts of users, you let them interact with these different sort of you let these different simulated cohorts of users interact with these are different agents that you have, and you measure how they actually interact with it, and now you have a means of ranking your system without really having to rely on these sort of offline data sets that don't have the information that you need. So that's all very nice, but how do you actually learn from this sort of Bandit feedback set? So the main thing you need is a stochastic system. When you would always show the same recommendations to the same users, that doesn't really give you a data set with enough rich signal to basically learn from that. So we are going to have a system that is going to be a mapping from a certain context to a certain set of actions. And when you have users that are sort of coming to your system, you log basically what is happening, and then you get a data set with these sort of context features X, which is the user. You have an identifier for the action, which is the sort of recommendation that you showed. You have the logging propensity, which is the probability with which you actually took this action. And then you also have the observed reward, which is whether the user clicked on that action. Once you have this, there are many things you can do. But the first two sort of big families of approaches are the value-based and the sort of policy-based ones. So in a value-based world, what you're actually trying to do is you try to model the probability of getting a click given a context action pair. And this is pretty straightforward, so you can use your favorite sort of classifier for this. But the main issue that you will have is that these sort of context action pairs will not be uniformly distributed, because you won't be showing your sort of recommendations uniformly at random either. And there will be a big bias in this data, and that is going to make this very hard to learn from. And one way around this is to focus on these sort of policy-based approaches, where you don't really care how good you are at trying to predict clicks, but you want to have a system that will lead to clicks. So instead of trying to model the reward, you try to have a sort of direct policy mapping where you have a probability distribution over actions that is conditioned on a context, and you try to maximize some sort of counterfactual estimate of the reward with this model. And most of these approaches will make use of something called inverse propensity scoring, or Okay, so these things already exist, but how do they actually map to the sort of task recommendation? Well, a first thing that is very important is in recommendation, we're going to deal with rewards that are stochastic. So this means that when you're showing a recommendation to a user, you will not get the same outcome always for the same actions in the same context. And at the same time, there might be multiple recommendations that can actually lead to a click when I show them to a user. And the problem that you get with this normal IPS estimator is that it's going to put all its probability mass on just the empirical best action in this setting. So when you have multiple recommendations at work, it's going to focus on a single one. But this is not something that you actually want in these settings. These are that are very noisy. Your samples are finite. You have high variance. It might not be best to just sort of put all of your eggs in one basket. So there is recent work that actually talks about a lower bound of this IPS estimator by looking at the logarithm of the learned probability. And they show that by using this, you can actually reduce the variance of the estimator and promote more sort of a certain sense of exploration in the learned policy. So in this work, we focus on whether you can actually use this lower bounds to reduce these rich get richer dynamics and have a more sort of proportional sort of allocation of mass in the learned policy. And it's a very short talk, so I will just skip to the conclusion. Yes, it can, and there is more information in the paper about that. So now you might be wondering, why is this paper called Joint Policy Value Learning? So there are two families of methods, as I said. You have these sort of policy-based methods on one hand that suffer from high variance due to these low propensity weights. And you have the value-based methods that don't really have a way to actually use these propensity scores in a good manner, and they are going to focus on the well-explored sort of context action pairs, and they also don't work great because of that. So is there a way to get the best of both worlds? And it turns out, yes, there is. We show in the paper that by adopting a sort of shared parameterization, you can actually have a single model that is going to sort of jointly optimize for two of these losses. And it's basically as simple as just having a weighted average of these two losses in your model instead of just two models aside. So do these things actually work? So this is going to be the slide that takes most of the explanation, I guess. So what you see here are simulated A/B test results in a Rijke gym. So over the sort of x-axis, you get more and more data that is being given to a model. And on the y-axis, you see the CTR that a model gets when it is sort of trained on this amount of data and then deployed in a live A/B test. And these three different plots show different logging policies. So the one on the right is when you are when your logging policy, so the policy that is live at the time you are sort of collecting your data, is showing actions uniformly at random. You can see that this means that your data is not biased, and most of these methods actually perform really, really well. But as you remove more and more like sort of randomization, it becomes much harder, and most of these methods actually see a steep drop in their performance. But you can also see that the use of the sort of dual bandit works better than the policy-based loss or the value-based loss by itself. And also the logarithmic thing here, it also has a small improvement that you can see in the case where there is not a lot of randomization. But you can also see that the log actually hurts performance when you have a decent amount of randomization. So the main reason for that is that it doesn't sort of pay off to be conservative when you're basically already in a pretty good setting. And when you can actually learn what is the best action, it's not a good idea to be very sort of cautious in what you're learning. Okay, so these are the observations again, but that's basically what I just said. So to conclude, we have sort of advocated for the use of Recogym to enable research in sort of counterfactual learning for recommendation. And the main reason for that is that we don't have any data sets available online that we can actually use. And it's very expensive to sort of deploy everything in a live A/B test. So we have given a sort of overview of these methods that already exist. We show where they tend to fail, and then we propose two solutions. So one being this lower bound for the normal IPS estimator, and one being a sort of joint policy value learning objective called the dual bandit. So a big thank you for your attention. The source code is available online, and I would be happy to ask any, to not ask, but answer any of your questions.
All right, thank you very much, Olivier. A round of applause again. Thank you. So it's actually funny for the questions here in the backstage. They have already asked some questions, so I'm going to ask Lean to add the next speaker, Harrie, who had a question for you, Olivier.
Yes, thank you for the talk, of course. I wanted to ask, you mentioned about a problem. This may be a more future work question, but you mentioned that for the value learning, it's very biased because your data is not gathered uniformly.
Right.
And that for policy learning, you fix the bias issue with inverse propensity scoring. But at least in theory, can't you also apply inverse propensity scoring to the value learning part? Yes.
Yes. So that works sort of in theory, and there basically are a few papers that do that, and they show that it works. It doesn't work in our setup, and the reason for that might be that we are actually using a pretty simple model. We're using a very straightforward model for the value learning part. And it might be that using these propensity weights sort of really is going to blow up the variance there. When you have a model that makes use of embeddings, for example, it might actually be able to sort of transfer more of this signal, and it might work better. But it doesn't work in our setting. Now we do have a poster on that, by the way. So there is some like sort of ways around it.
I see. Now it sounds like you're combining a low variance biased estimator in this case with a high variance unbiased estimator, which is that correct? Well, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Yeah, right.
So the poster that you were mentioning, Olivier, I understand correctly that this will be presented in Gather.
Yes.
And people can visit you in Gather
exactly
during coffee breaks, etc.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much. We have one more question in the comments from Jan. Well, here it is. Can you choose how noisy the simulated data from Recogym is going to be, or how difficult the task will be?
Yes. And that is the main strength, I would say, of making use of like this like sort of simulator. That you actually can sort of play God, and you can tweak different things. You can tweak your logging policy. You can tweak the size of the action space. And you can then see how these different methods are going to sort of react to these changes. And that really helps in sort of understanding how they actually work. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause again. Harrie, now you can help me. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Olivier. Due to time, we are perfectly on time. Let's move. to our next speaker who is already here. It's Harrie Oosterhuis from Amsterdam, who will talk about policy-aware unbiased learning to rank for top K rankings, which was presented at SIG-IR already this year. So, Harrie, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Bart. Right. So this is our SIG-IR publication of this year. Together with Maarten de Rijke from the University of Amsterdam, I've just moved over to Radboud University in Nijmegen, although I am currently in Amsterdam, so everything still checks out. Right, so I only have 10 minutes, so let's get into it. I want to start by talking about top K ranking, and probably most of you already know what top K ranking is, but just to be very clear, when I say top K ranking, I mean we have a ranking setting where not all the items can be displayed at once. So you see this very often in search and recommendation, especially in recommendation, because you're not going to show the entire collection of items that you may recommend to a user at once. Usually you only show a smaller selection, so a top K. And the goal for this paper was we want to optimize systems for these top K ranking settings. We go a bit further. We want to optimize them for based on user interactions. So again, just for clarity, here we have an example that I'll be using where there's a user query where we have 5 items to be ranked, but only 4 items to be displayed. So the very basic situation where you have a top K ranking. We want to use counterfactual learning to rank. Counterfactual learning to rank is a way to learn from historically logged user clicks. So click logs, you have users who used your system before, and you have that logged data, and you want to learn from those clicks. But the problem is that these clicks are biased indicators of preference. This basically means that they're not only affected by the preferences of the user, but also by other factors. And of course, we want to learn the preferences, so we have to correct for those other factors. And in this case, we're focusing on position bias, which comes down to the order in which you show items affect where people will click. Because people are more likely to look at the first item than the last item. They're also more likely to click there. And the existing solution is to use inverse propensity scoring, where you weight these clicks to correct for this position bias. I'm not going to go into the actual method, but instead I want to discuss the intuition behind the method. If you want to know the details, you can of course read the paper. I just want to understand sort of what the underlying ideas that we introduced. For the existing work, for the which we call policy oblivious, to contrast with our policy aware method, we have our item D, our displayed ranking R, and our query Q. And the trick is that we're decomposing the click probability in probability of examination and the probability of relevance. This is of course an assumption, but it's an assumption that works quite well in practice. So the probability of a click on an item given a certain ranking is the probability that the user is going to examine this item, and that only depends on where you show the item. So depending on the position, the user is more or less likely to examine the item. And then the probability of relevance, that means how likely is the user going to click given that they examined the item. And then the trick here with inverse propensity scoring is that if you divide this click probability by the examination probability, you have the relevance probability left. So what you can do is you can look basically how often did people click on an item, and for each click, how likely was the user actually to look at the item in that interaction, and that corrects for this examination probability. So another way of looking at it, here we have the example again. This time we know, in this case, based on previous experiments, how likely people are to look at each rank. So if item 3 has a 50% chance of being observed, we basically will multiply the weight of each click by 2. So if you see 100 people click on item 3, you can say, well, if I know that 50% of people were looking at item 3, so if 100% of people were looking at item 3, I would have seen 200 clicks. And that gets rid of this position bias effect. So that's all great, but now the problem arises when we move this idea to the top K ranking setting. Because in the top K ranking setting, we know that there are items that cannot be observed. And that means they're they have the most extreme form of position bias, where the observation probability is 0. Now, the approach I just described will not work here because there are no clicks to weight, right? You cannot reweight any of these clicks because no one can click on item 5 because they're not shown item 5 to begin with. So this is a big problem because it means that all the proofs about unbiasedness don't apply anymore when item selection bias takes place, which basically means any top K ranking setting. So we introduced a new estimator to solve this problem. And the basic realization was that if you have a stochastic policy, so a policy that can show there's a probability distribution over rankings, so it can show different rankings with different probability, then you can condition the click probability on the policy. So here we have almost the same formula as I've shown you before, but the difference now is, I don't know if you can see my mouse by the way, but on the left here, instead of conditioning it on the ranking, I've conditioned it on the policy pi. So the probability is now how likely someone to click this item given the policy, not the specific ranking. And we can describe the rest of the formula as an expectation over all the rankings. So we sum over every possible ranking that the policy may show. Then we have the probability that the policy is going to show this ranking, the probability that the user is going to examine the item given that this item, this ranking was shown, and then the probability that the user is going to click given that the user has examined the item. So we've added this expectation over all the rankings. And our policy-aware estimator is completely analogous to the previous estimator, except that it divides by this expectation probability conditioned on the policy. It still is the same idea. You divide away the examination probability, but this time conditioned on the policy, and you have the probability of relevance left. And it's unbiased, in this case, if every item has a non-zero chance of being displayed in the top K. So before, every item needed to be displayed. Now the only thing that's necessary is that every item has a non-zero chance of being displayed. And that's something you can always do, right? You can always give every item at least a non-zero probability of being displayed. So let me walk you through an example. So here we have the same example as before, where only 4 items are displayed out of 5. But now there are 2 possible rankings. So one ranking where we have item 4 being displayed at the last position, and one where we have item 5 being displayed on the last position. Now, if somebody clicks on item 5, to calculate the weight, we take into account both the position bias probabilities and the policy probabilities. So the first probability is the ranking. How likely is this ranking to be displayed? Well, we have a 20% chance. Then how likely is the user to examine the item after it's been displayed? Well, sorry. How likely is the user to examine the item and it being displayed? That's 20 times 40%, so that gives us an 8% probability of the user examining this. So then the weight will be 1 divided by 0.08, which is 12.5. So the important part is that we're correcting for both the position bias and the policy probability. All right, I want to show you some results, but I don't have time to explain what's completely going on here. Of course, you can ask me questions about it. But this is a simulation where we have clicks that are noisy and biased. And what we've done is we've learned from, I think, 100 million clicks. 100 million clicks. But we've generated different amounts of, for every display position that you see here, we generated 100 million clicks and then ran the baselines in our estimator to do learning to rank. So for average relevant position, you see this red line is right on this dotted line. The dotted line is sort of the optimal model. The red line is where our model ends. You can see it approximates the other model very well. In NECG, where the higher is the better, we see the same result. And all the other baselines are very affected by this number of display positions. So if you have a lot of selection bias, item selection bias, they are very much affected. I want to say, before I move on, that some of these baselines are learning from the exact same data, so the same randomization as the policy-aware estimator. So it's a fair comparison, I'd say. All right. So the main takeaways I think you should have from our paper and from this presentation is the existing counterfactual learning to rank approach cannot correct for item selection bias. We've introduced a novel policy-aware estimator that can do this, but it needs some mild randomization. What we've also done, what I haven't talked about in the presentation, is we've shown that you can use lambda loss, or lambda mart as well, and use it for counterfactual learning to rank without any big changes. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Harrie, and a round of applause again. Thank you. Very nice. Let's check the comments. No questions so far in the comments, so please feel free to add your questions if you have some for Harrie. Harrie, I have one actually. Yes. So this is really interesting, but I'm actually wondering in practice. So in real life, if you want to use this, I was wondering, this position bias is, I guess, typically not static. And so in a real-time environment, a retailer, whatever, or wherever, you can compute these position biases in front, if I understand correctly, but this is a very dynamic environment, so they might change quickly. How do you cope for that? Or
right, so you're absolutely right. It's not static. It can differ per user. It can differ per time of day, you name it. The important part is when you gather your data, that's the bias that you're correcting for, and the bias that you correct for can be sort of averaged over the entire data set. So if we are two users, right, and if we have a different position bias, the total bias in the data set is going to be some average of the two of us. So you don't need to know exactly, this user likes to look at all the items and this user doesn't. You just need to know in this scenario, on average, how often do people look at these different places. If you do personalization, that's a different question, of course. But for this scenario, generally speaking, you need to know the bias in the data that you've gathered. And if you change the UI or anything, then the position bias is changing. So.
So actually, there was one question from Lucas de Haas. In practice, how do you obtain the probability of ranking for a policy?
Yes, yeah. So this is a very good point. So in the paper, we just assume that we know it because we're the ones that set the policy. In practice, you might, if you have control over the system, you might already know this probability. But we've also found that you can actually estimate it quite well. So we have some publications that aren't available yet, but have been accepted where we do that. So instead of knowing the probability, we take a frequency estimate. We can just see how often was this ranking shown, and that actually works well enough in all the scenarios that we tried it. So I think it's not a big problem, as far as I can tell, of course.
All right, perfect. So thank you. Thanks again, Harrie. Very nice.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Now I would like to thank all three speakers in this first session of DIR this year, and that's Felipe, Olivier, and Harrie. All three of you, thank you very much for, in Dutch, the speech after baton. Sorry, I didn't remember how to say it in English. No, doesn't matter. So everyone now, thank you all for being in this session. We now have a coffee break, so stretch your legs, but also make sure to attend the gather space where you can have fun, where you can meet people, where you can do some networking, visit the sponsor booths, etc., even play games. Our next session here will be at 11 with 3 lightning talks on natural language processing. The links you can find in the invite Eventbrite in your email or on our channel. So thank you all very much, and looking forward to meet you in Gather during the coffee break.